My name is Alex, and for most of my life I thought my parents were completely normal, maybe even a little dull. I was busy with college and my own emerging career, so I kept a healthy distance. We weren't estranged, just separated by ambition and the general chaos of being in your early 20s. Then Mom changed. It started subtly. She traded her casual clothes for a sharper blazer. The phone calls became constant, too. She wasn't talking about recipes or neighborhood gossip anymore. She was talking about growth and vertical scaling. It was bizarre. She said she'd found a new hobby, a women's group that was helping her achieve her true potential. She called it the book club. I was genuinely happy for her. Mom, Sarah, had always been a little reserved. Seeing her energized, connecting with others, and finding purpose felt like a huge win. It was a moment of wish fulfillment for me. I wanted my mother to be happy and fulfilled. My father, Richard, was fine with it too. He was always busy with major consulting work that kept him traveling or working late. He saw Mom's club as a convenient way to keep her occupied while he managed the more serious family finances. The group, officially Elevate and Thrive, or E&T, wasn't about books at all. It was about life coaching and mindset transformation. The actual product was just generic PDFs and recorded webinars. The focus of the meetings was on enthusiasm and recruitment, not content. In the first few weeks, Mom was swamped. She needed my help setting up the website and managing the payments. "I need your expertise, honey," she'd said. "Just integrate the new payment gateway. It's all digital now." It seemed like a simple, non-suspicious job. I agreed immediately. I was installing the Trojan horse myself. As I started the setup, the first strange details popped up. First, the fees were astronomical. This was not a neighborhood club. The initial investment required a serious chunk of money, especially for the low quality of the content. Second, there was Dad's money. He was clearly funding the operation. Richard never attended, but his involvement was constant. He paid for all the initial costs and materials. He kept his own work remote, using P.O. boxes and virtual offices. He avoided having any single, traceable physical office location. This made him elusive and hard to pin down. Third, I noticed the payment routing was unnecessarily complicated. Instead of one straightforward transaction processor, the money did a three-step dance: a foreign service, a quick stop in a crypto wallet, and then the main bank account. It was designed to confuse, not simplify. And finally, the cash. Mom was constantly getting physical money. She wouldn't deposit it all at once. She was always running out to the bank with envelopes, making several small cash deposits a week. It was too much work for a simple club. It looked like smurfing. I pushed my general skepticism down. I told myself Mom was just bad at business. Dad was just paranoid about taxes. I kept coding. I integrated the system. I helped my mother build her new, exciting hobby. But the oddities kept escalating as I dug deeper into the back-end system. I had access to the membership database I'd built. I could see the actual number of new recruits per week. It was slow, sometimes zero. The growth wasn't matching the buzz or, more importantly, the sudden increase in my parents' disposable income. Mom started buying things, expensive things, a new car for herself, designer clothes. She started hosting lavish parties for the women in the book club at our house, demanding I help serve drinks and manage the logistics. I'd overhear their conversations. They weren't sharing notes on success. They were sharing desperate tips on how to recruit their friends and family. The focus was always on selling the idea, never the actual product. I tried to talk to her about the product itself. "Mom, have you actually watched the full Mindset Mastery webinar? It's just recycled corporate jargon." She'd wave me off, already irritated. "You don't understand, Alex. This isn't about the content. It's about the community and the framework for success. Richard says we have to focus on the vision." The mention of Richard was a shield. She used his name to deflect any criticism or genuine inquiry. He was the one managing the money, the one with the complex tax strategies, and the one who understood real business. My suspicion wasn't just a nagging feeling anymore. It was an active project. I started cross-referencing the E&T payment flow I'd set up with actual banking dates. The numbers never quite aligned with the member signups I could track. I knew enough about finance, and more than enough about my mother, to know that something was deeply wrong. The The joy I initially felt for her was replaced by a cold knot of dread. I was the keeper of the digital keys to a system that was beginning to look less like an amateur book club and more like a carefully orchestrated financial deception. I was the insider, and I couldn't unsee what my access had revealed. I began to research keywords on my own time: multi-level marketing, recruitment scheme, and the one that chilled me the most, smurfing. My mother was laundering money, and I was the one who built the door for the cash to walk through. The setup was complete, and now it was time to follow the trail. I stopped telling myself that Dad was just paranoid about taxes. I knew I had to stop helping and start investigating. My access to the system, which Mom had asked me to build, became my tool for forensic work. I began my deep dive in the place where the whole scheme was most vulnerable: the numbers. First, I focused on the internal documents. While Mom asked me to manage the front end, the pretty website and the payment portal, Richard had left a trove of internal corporate jargon on a shared cloud drive I still had access to. It was all codes and acronyms: D, L for downline, RI for recruitment incentives, and BV for breakaway volume. The language wasn't about wellness, it was about structure. I researched those terms. That's when I found the diagrams. The flowcharts were undeniable. The E and T model was a classic pyramid scheme. The only way to make significant money was to recruit others, not sell the digital PDFs. The product was just a fig leaf for the true business model: chain recruiting. The fees paid by new members flowed directly up the chain to the top tier, where Richard and Mom sat. The realization hit me hard. This wasn't a misguided hobby, it was a fraud. But the fraud was only half the problem. The other half was the cash. My next step was to prove the money laundering. I cross-referenced the two data sets I controlled: the member roster, the number of people who actually signed up via the payment gateway I managed, and the bank statements that Mom had left logged in on the family computer. The numbers were impossible. In a given week, my member roster would show 3 legitimate new signups. Their payments, filtered through the 3-stage obfuscation system, totaled maybe $900. But the bank statement for that same week showed 22 separate small cash deposits, totaling $7,000. The volume of cash deposits was 10 times greater than the revenue generated by the actual MLM. Product sales. This was the key forensic proof. The goal wasn't just to make money from recruits, it was to sanitize money from another, likely illicit, source. Mom was feeding large amounts of dirty money into the banking system, breaking it down into small, untraceable chunks and labeling it as legitimate member fees. I started searching the house for answers. I knew Richard kept a physical ledger for his serious business. I found it hidden behind a loose panel in his old filing cabinet. It wasn't neatly printed. It was a cheap composition book, handwritten. Inside, I found his true accounting. He detailed large, round figures, not from consulting, but clearly from an off-the-book source. The corresponding entries instructed Sarah to disperse via E&T. Channel. I saw the handwritten initials, SA, next to the weekly totals that precisely matched the bulk amounts Mom was depositing as cash. This was the smoking gun. It wasn't just a scheme. It was a sophisticated money laundering operation, and Mom wasn't just a victim or a dupe. She was actively handling the cash and structuring the deposits. The evidence was too heavy to carry alone. I printed out the most damning page of Richard's ledger, circled the discrepancy in the bank statement, and confronted Sarah in the kitchen one Tuesday morning. I tried to start softly, mentioning the weird math and the clear pyramid structure. She immediately became defensive, not confused. "Alex, you're trying to undermine me. You don't understand real business. This is how entrepreneurs build wealth." "Mom, this isn't entrepreneurship," I said, pushing the bank statement across the counter. "Look at this. Your deposits are 10 times the number of recruits. This is structuring. This is illegal." Then I pushed Richard's ledger toward her. "Where did this cash come from? Why are you hiding thousands of untraceable dollars as member fees?" The defense I expected, confusion, fear, denial, didn't happen. Instead, the sweet facade crumbled, revealing something colder. Sarah didn't admit guilt, but she didn't claim innocence either. She chose rationalization and self-preservation. "I earned this," she insisted, her voice tight with fury, not distress. "I built this community. The content is valuable if people just work hard at it. Richard handles the tax stuff so we can keep building the business and have the life we deserve. You think I want to go back to coupon clipping and driving that old sedan? She was protecting the money and the lavish lifestyle she had gained, fully aware of the illegal mechanics that made it possible. She was an accomplice, and her complicity was crushing. The conversation ended with her threatening to cut off my access to everything if I didn't back off. The rift became a chasm. I felt utterly alone, trapped between the law and the family I was supposed to protect. The moral weight became physical when I met Eleanor. Eleanor was an older woman, a retired schoolteacher who had been recruited personally by my mother. I saw Eleanor one afternoon when she came by the house, distraught, asking for a refund. I overheard her talking to Mom, practically begging. Eleanor had invested her entire emergency savings, thinking E&T was her path to a retirement cushion. Now she was desperate, realizing she couldn't recoup her investment without resorting to the predatory recruitment tactics Sarah had pushed. Mom handled Eleanor with practiced coldness, referencing the non-refundable terms and pushing her out the door. Seeing my mother knowingly exploit a vulnerable woman, a woman she had charmed, cemented the reality. This was not just a white-collar crime, it was predatory. Later that week, Richard cornered me. He knew the argument with Mom hadn't gone well. He didn't need to yell. His voice was quiet, menacing. He didn't admit to a crime, but the threat was crystal clear. "Look, Alex," he said, holding my gaze. "I'm the one who handles the big picture. You have your mother. If this house of cards falls, Alex, your mother will be the one holding the deck. I'm busy protecting her. Don't be the reason I fail." He weaponized my loyalty to Sarah, placing the fate of my mother, an accomplice who was now desperate to maintain her status, squarely on my shoulders. The problem was no longer theoretical. It was personal, criminal, and terrifying. I had the evidence. I knew the truth. And I knew my next move would destroy my family one way or another. The tension in the house became unbearable. Mom was panicked, not just about the business failing, but about Richard's increasingly cold behavior. The whole elevate and thrive illusion was hitting the wall. Complaints started pouring in. Membership stalled completely. The newest recruits, the ones at the bottom of the pyramid, were losing their money and starting to ask for refunds. Then they started talking on social media. I noticed the pace of Richard's business trips accelerating. He was moving assets. I saw him shredding old paper copies of his ledgers, but he was careless, focused only on the big things. I realized he wasn't just planning an exit. He was preparing an escape. And he was making sure Sarah was left behind to handle the resulting mess. Then, the final catastrophe hit. Mom called me, her voice shaking, not with frustration but genuine terror. I drove over immediately. She was sitting in the living room, surrounded by legal papers. The threat wasn't a civil lawsuit from disgruntled members anymore. It was criminal. The SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission, had served a subpoena. Or maybe the Attorney General's office. It didn't matter which one. It was the government. It meant fraud and it meant prison. Richard was gone. He had flown out hours earlier on a private flight, leaving Sarah a cryptic, untraceable message saying he was handling things from offshore. She was the one facing the investigation. She was the one on the warrant. Sarah finally confessed everything, not the rationalizations she gave me before, but the ugly, real truth. She admitted she knew it was a crime. She admitted she was the one structuring the cash deposits. She did it for the money, for the status, and because Richard promised she would be untouchable. She wasn't begging for understanding. She was begging for self-preservation. She shoved a thumb drive and a stack of files toward me. "Alex, you built the system. You're the only one who understands the log files. You have to scrub the routing data. You have to make the cash deposits look like legitimate online sales." She was appealing to my core. She was asking her daughter to commit a felony, to destroy forensic evidence, to save her from jail time. I went into Richard's office and locked the door. I was alone, staring at the hard drives, the banking records, and Mom's desperate, panicked face through the glass. The choice was agonizing. If I helped her, Richard would win completely. They would both get away with it, and the cycle of exploitation would continue somewhere else. I would be complicit in a serious crime, saving a knowing criminal. If I exposed her, my family would be destroyed. The life I knew would end in shame and criminal prosecution. My thoughts went to Eleanor, the elderly woman who had lost her entire savings. My mother had charmed that money out of her. Protecting Sarah meant condemning people like Alina. I knew what I had to do. The loyalty I felt for my mother could not outweigh the harm she willingly inflicted on others. The cost was too high. I began working, but not the way Sarah wanted. I didn't scrub anything. Instead, I worked fast, digitizing every single piece of incriminating evidence. Richard's handwritten ledger, the original, unedited bank statements, and the full communication logs between Richard and Sarah. I organized it all in a secure, encrypted file. I found the contact information for the lawyer representing the victims, the one Alina had mentioned. It was the final, devastating act. I sent the complete package of evidence to that lawyer, mentioning Alina by name to ensure the victim side of the case was prioritized. I hit send. I felt a violent, final snap in my chest. The betrayal was complete, but so was the action. I took the thumb drive containing the digital evidence, walked out of the office and out of the house. I left my mother to face the consequences of her choices alone. I left everything behind that night. I didn't take clothes or contact anyone. I just drove until the immediate burning guilt subsided enough for me to think clearly. The betrayal felt absolute. Within 48 hours, the news broke. The SEC raids were swift. The news reported the collapse of the Elevate and Thrive scheme, calling it a classic predatory pyramid structure. They highlighted the gross discrepancies in the deposits. Richard, the mastermind, was nowhere to be found. He had used his elaborate network of virtual offices and shell companies to execute a perfect escape. He was now an international fugitive. He had won the financial battle, disappearing with his fortune, leaving the wreckage behind him. But Sarah, my mother, was the one who faced the music. She was the one who handled the physical money, the one who spoke at the events, and the one who was left holding the box of paper documents. The investigation focused immediately on her role as a key financial accomplice. The evidence I sent to the victim's lawyer was immediately handed over to the authorities. It was irrefutable. It showed she was a knowing participant in the money structuring. My relationship with her was over, destroyed by my one act of moral clarity. The aftermath wasn't dramatic yelling. It was complex, miserable silence. There were no more family dinners, no more casual phone calls. The shame was suffocating. I had allowed my mother to face the consequences of her greedy choices, but the feeling of loss was overwhelming. I wasn't a hero. I was just someone who had executed a necessary, deeply painful surgery on her own life. The house, once a symbol of the family's manufactured prosperity, was seized. The new car disappeared. Everything they had acquired through the scheme was gone, taken as part of the legal proceedings. Their life was not just downgraded, it was dismantled. I heard from Alina, the elderly victim. Her lawyer contacted me, assuring me that the evidence I provided was pivotal. It was my only form of closure. My sacrifice had protected vulnerable people like her from further devastation, and it was the only thing that justified the destruction of my family. Months passed. My life became quiet, rebuilt brick by brick on truth and transparency. The constant background tension of maintaining the lie was gone, replaced by a quiet, honest struggle. I often thought about the insidious nature of the scheme. It wasn't just about money. It exploited my mother's desire for status and community, and in turn, it exploited other women's dreams. Richard was a master at exploiting wish fulfillment, and Mom had been a willing agent in that exploitation. My loyalty to her had been tested to its limit. I had learned that loyalty must have boundaries, and those boundaries must be anchored in ethics, not blood. Protecting a person sometimes means allowing them to face the harsh reality of their own decisions. I live simply now. I'm financially independent, earned through honest work, not ill-gotten gains. The memory of the book club and the smell of the physical cash Mom used to deposit are sharp reminders of how easily reality can be corrupted. I survived the fallout. I am still conflicted, burdened by the cost of the decision I made that Tuesday morning. But I am empowered. I chose justice, and in doing so I chose my own integrity. The destruction was necessary. The deception is finally over. Subscribe if you like the story. We have many more.